Greetings and welcome to the ROI Clear podcast. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Mr. Mike Hubbell. Mike Hubbell is CEO of Lux Living Homes. He's been an entrepreneur since 1997. He has over 1,100 restored or new construction projects that he has completed in his career. He is a general contractor, a builder, a project manager, and a fundraiser for real estate developments. Let's dig into what he has done. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Mike Hubbell. Mike, welcome to the ROI Clear podcast.
Well, Ray, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm really glad that we were able to connect. We met a couple months ago, and I knew really quickly we were going to be friends. So
very good.
Thanks for the connection.
I appreciate that. I'm grateful, always grateful to share ideas and connect with a fellow capitalist. As you know, here at the ROI Clear podcast and at ROI Clear, the company, we believe capitalism is a great economic system, and it is something that drives people to do things for each other, and we become productive and we help each other through capitalism. So great to connect with you. To kick things off, let's start with an elevator pitch. And for those who are new to the ROI Clear podcast, Mike Hubbell is on an elevator with someone he wants to influence. So Mike, what would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
Ray, listen, I'm going to take you back to 2019, and I was struggling as a business, and it wasn't working. And the only thing I can remember about that time, besides all the issues that were going on, was I just wanted somebody to help me. And that old adage that nobody's going to come and help you, I wanted to change. And so I started this company, 3.5 years ago. It really started 4 years ago in my mind of how can I help people that are in distress with their assets. Everything that I've worked for in my life comes down to that, which is all distressed assets have distressed people. There are people that are going through divorces. There are people that are going through midlife crisis. There's people that are all the different things. And so what I've learned in my life and my long career is I will invest in people even before profits. But people before profits doesn't mean there aren't profits. In my experience, profits are elevated when you invest in people.
Profits are elevated when you invest in people. Unpack that for us, if you will, or give us an example. I mean, there's so many questions there. We could talk about 2019. You were at your back was against the wall. I may be putting words in your mouth, but your back was against the wall. You were going through a business challenge, as we all have. Those of us who've been entrepreneurs for a few decades know that you go through business challenges and vicissitudes and ups and downs and all of this. What was going on that helped you to develop that philosophy?
Well, the philosophy, when you look at the creative destruction of things and you look at distressed assets, and I can name off 10 people in this industry. Zell, he talked about distressed assets and how well he did with distressed assets, and he made his billions doing distressed assets, right? Mm-hmm. But what that doesn't take into account is what happened to the people that had the distressed assets. And so there is a way in on the profitability side to invest in people, to bring them along, to show them a better way, to assist them when they have fallen down. While you stand on top of the mountaintop, you pull them up, right? So that's what I mean by distressed people, and that's what I mean about bringing them to the top and how the profits are driven. Much time, just think about this, how our system works. Our system works in which somebody does something bad, or you don't even have to do anything in today's market. You raise interest rates by 5 basis points, it just messes up all kinds of modeling, right?
Sure, right.
And you really didn't do anything about that. But you have these operators that are caught in the middle of that. And so our goal and our purpose in life is going to help the operator, put some systems in place that we know that work, recapitalize a project, bring them along if they want to come along as our new future partner, and profit at the end. And the beauty of that is instead of the project going to the highest bidder, it just goes to the one and only bidder, us. So just think about that. When you compete, when the market says you have to compete with others, the price is always elevated, even in a distressed deal, because rarely are you the only one that's in the deal. So when you go in there and help everybody out, it works to benefit. I'm going to give you one great example of the first asset that we did coming out of the mess. I had these 4 distressed assets that were sitting up on the hillside in the Camas, Washington area. It's a very affluent. The average income, I think it's $200,000, but the mean is much higher. It's in the $400,000 to $500,000 per household. And on this hilltop that overlooks the city and overlooks, you can see into Portland, Vancouver, you can see the valley, whatever, were these 4 houses that every time the sun shined down on them, instead of looking like a brand new house, they look like a dilapidated war zone. And so I first reached out to the lender and said, hey, let me help you with this situation. I think I'm an expert at this. I can get this done. They laughed in my face and pretty much hung up on me. So then I continued to be persistent. I called him again and I said, hey, are you aware that the city, because I'd called the city who I was friends with, are you aware that the city has now condemned your 4 houses and they're going to be bulldozed? And you're going to be fighting in a courtroom instead of fighting in the boardroom.
They were not aware that the city was planning to bulldoze their houses.
They were not. But the city, the head of the city told me that they'd sent all the documents over to the attorneys, and the attorneys were drafting the letters as they speak. So I said to them, so I went back to them and said, listen, you need to do something with this. And I gave them a price and a process in order to finish out the assets. Now, mind you, this is a lender. Everybody doesn't really like the lender. It's like, this is the person, right? But I'm there to help the distressed, even though they don't know they're in distress sometimes. So I'm just there to assist them and to provide the expertise. So I go back to the city and I said, listen, I want you to remove that order and I'll agree to come in there and develop these properties for you. I'll bring in all my engineers and all my experts and we'll take care of this asset. But we'll make sure that instead of being blight in the middle of a multi-million-dollar community, you're going to have 4 nice luxury homes that have view of the whole valley. And everybody's going to love everybody over when it's said and done. And they said, let's do it. So I went back to the lender and I said, listen, why don't we do this? Well, check this out. The lender was already in it $2 million. Yeah. They were getting offers for around $600,000 to $800,000 to come in and buy these 4. And everybody was talking about bulldozing. But I saw the value to what there. I walked the property. I felt the property. I felt the sheathing that had been exposed to the rain for 4 years. I thought, I've got a plan. I know how to fix this. I got up on the roof where the valleys weren't coming together right, and where they had points in which water was going right through the middle of the house, putting rainwater. And if you're familiar with the Portland area, we get considerable amount of rain every year.
Oh yes, it's very green and very rainy. Yeah.
So here we are. You got a house that's got rain coming into it. And then one of them, it just had the foundations. Another one, they had just the main floor was done, but the second floor wasn't even done. It's been exposed to the rain. Everybody's idea was, let's demolish it. Right. Once again, remember what I said. I just wanted somebody to put their hand out and say, let me help you. Not let me help you and destroy you, but let me help you. Let me assist you. Let me serve you. Let me figure out how to do that. So then I turn around and I go back to them and they say, hey, let's meet up in the office. I'd already given them a bid. I'd already given them everything. I went and met with them in the office. And before I could even get in a word out of my mouth, they said, we're going to give you $2.2 million. Oh, and they said, hey, have you added any markup to this? And I kind of really had already done that. I said, no, sure, no, not yet.
Yes.
And so then we added another 20%, which is roughly another $400,000 to the deal. And then I said, on top of this, I want to represent the seller side. I want to sell this property for you. So here's my agent. This is what we're going to do. It's not going to cost you any more. And we're going to get another, 4 or 5%. So I went to my, so I put that deal together. I brought my engineers in, I brought everybody in, and they said, here we go. You're ready to go. They said, here's my direct number. So here you got the head of the fund, the head of the lender. I got his direct number. Anytime you have a problem, just call me. Like, none of this mess that goes on with builders where you don't get your draws on time, or the pictures don't look right. None of that. It wasn't that. It was, hey, Mike, are you having a problem? Hey, I'm having a problem. Can I get my draws quicker? Yes. All those things. I was there to assist them and help them. Ultimately, the property sold around $4.8 million to $5 million collectively. They spent another 2.4, I think. At the end of the day, they made some money, but also they made money because they got their interest that they charged the previous person. So all in all, I helped a distressed lender, not because they didn't know what they were doing, but because I was a resource and I helped them. They made profit. I made profit. Everybody walked away with something good.
Let us summarize this, because there's a lot going on here. First, you notice these distressed properties in, is it Camas or Camas? How do I pronounce it?
Camas.
Camas. In Camas, an affluent area. When the sun shone on them, they showed their dilapidation big time. The lender was thinking they might get $600,000 for these properties. You went to them and said, hey, I know that I can turn this around. You went, walked the properties, felt the sheetrock, felt the properties, and knew you could turn these around because you had already assembled a team of engineers and construction people, and you had already assembled a team that could do this with you. So you went in, and the first time you went in to tell them that you could fix this, they laughed at you. They laughed you out of their offices, but you were persistent.
They just hung up.
And they hung up. First they laughed at you, then they hung up the phone. And let me make sure I get that right. Yes, first they laughed, then they hung up the phone. You went to the city. You talked to the city about what needed to be done to the properties. The city told you these were already on the list to be bulldozed. You went back to the lender. Hey, that $600,000 you think you're going to get? It ain't even going to be that. It's not even going to be that. Let me help you. You were always approaching this from a position of helping them, helping the lender, helping the city, helping the seller. Finally, the lender put together a package for you at $2.2 million. You had already put in your portion there, but they asked you, do you need an override? They ended up adding an additional $400,000 on top of that. So you're in for like, what, $2.6 million? That's what the lender's putting into it roughly.
Yeah.
And you ended up selling the properties between $4 and $5 million. Huge
Correct.
profit on this deal because you were willing to help.
Correct. And that's what I mean by helping distressed. And you can see this situation. I can tell you a time that I had another property that we're doing a net zero development. For those that don't know what net zero is, it produces as much energy as it consumes. So we have a net zero community that we're about ready to break ground on. When I bought it, the seller was in distress because he had sold his business. And so he was advertising the land where his business was. And when I went to go look at that land, he happened to mention to me, hey, I've got this property up the street and I really need to get rid of it because I don't have any way to make income. And I've got a couple other developments I need to do. Can you, are you interested in it? And I'm like, yeah, this is right up my alley, right? Yeah. And so I bought a piece of property that was, roughly $600,000 that within 6 months appraised for 1.4 to 1.5 without even really doing anything to it. It's a basic short plat and it does take time. But once again, I was helping him out of a distressed situation in which he had sold his business. The people had backed out of it. He'd closed the business in the meantime. And so I was just there to help him. I was not there to take from him. And I want to make sure you understand that the destructive power of foreclosures and things like that, people deal with it differently. It's a fight or flight. It's one of those two responses. So what I'm trying to do is get rid of the fight or flight in the middle of our negotiations with people so that they don't feel like they have to run or they have to fight. If they fight, they spend a lot more money. If they fight, they lose a lot more money. And I try to make it work so that everybody, it's not like a feel-good story. It's different than that. It's saying, hey, I've got you. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to help you out. And it doesn't mean that we don't have restrictions on the people that we help. It just means that we're not going to, they've had enough issues in their life where people are trying to take from them. And I don't want to be in a position in life where we're taking from others. And I've been on all sides of it. I just want to make sure you understand that. I've been on every side of this. I bought hundreds of distressed assets. And I've watched people that had a dream for their house and for their family, it just goes away. And I look at that and I say, I didn't do bad, but I'm not necessarily doing good. And at the end of the day, I think it's more important in life that we do good. Doing good is profitable.
Mike, your bio says you're an entrepreneur, but I would argue that you're also a psychologist.
Like I said, I think I come from the best because I've really experienced it all. I've experienced as much failure, way more failure, I think, than I have success. And I just know how I would want to be treated. Right.
Yeah.
And so because you get very comfortable with how you want to be treated, it's easy to help somebody else and to help teach somebody else. And like I said, hey, that doesn't mean that if you've ever you understand the adage of success, and as you're going up the road of success, it is almost impossible to take everybody with you because you have to have your hands full and you're pushing to the mountaintop. You got to get up on top of that mountain. You got to get on top of that mountain so that you can pull people up. Because once you pull people up, you're on top of the mountain, you're on flat ground. You don't have all the situations happen to you. And part of being on top of that mountain is being on top of the mountain here, like understanding who you are and what you are and how do I make things work.
I'm glad you're headed down this path because my next question and line of questioning really is around how did you get to be shaped in this way? You've said, I'm going to quote you, I've experienced way more failure than success, and I know how I would want to be treated. And you also said, I was there to help him. I was not there to hurt him. What forces and experiences shaped Mike Hubbell into the person who thinks that way today?
Well, have you ever read the bio on Abraham Lincoln?
Which one? The one, Daniel?
No, just the bio. Like this is like an overdraft of what his life was, and it goes down and lost the Senate seat, lost his practice.
Yes, a lot of losses. Yeah, right? I grew up in Illinois, so yeah, we talked a lot about Lincoln, and yeah, he went through a lot of hell, and then eventually,
right? And so. Yeah. That's the same thing in business. My first business was not an utter failure. It was a failure, but I learned the greatest lesson I've learned ever, which is you never give up. Because you can give up in the middle of a storm and you don't recognize how close you are to being where you want to be.
Right.
And you're right there as a business. And when I look back at it, what I realized is I was about 2-3 months from profitability in my first business in 97, right? And I was there. But I couldn't see it because I couldn't get high enough to look down to know what was going on.
Right.
And so my headspace is not much different than when I walk. I talk to myself about success, right? And that stopped me from thinking about all the things that come against you on a daily basis as an entrepreneur. Well, the same thing when I was in the middle of the business, I couldn't see all the things that were going on. I couldn't see it from a high enough level, and I couldn't think my way out of it. So my first lesson in business in the early 2000s or the late 90s was just don't quit. Like there will be days as an entrepreneur where the next thing that's most important to you is just one step. And I can only control that one step today, but I need to do that one step. I remember thinking 4 or 5 years ago, I just need to get the taxes done. And the taxes were bothering me because here I had a company that was closing down, and I was worried about any tax things and all the things. And I had stressed out about it for a while, but once I figured it out, you just need to get this done. It's roughly $1,500, get it done. And when it gets done, everybody will move on. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing that I could control that day. I couldn't control any other thing. So that was the first great lesson that I learned. And so fast forward 2007, 2008, I'm working for all these big companies, and they're all investors. They're doing the exact same thing as I'm doing, which is they're dealing in distressed assets. And 2007 starts coming around, and I noticed my customers can't pay me. My investors and my developers could not pay me timely.
You knew they were in trouble. You saw that trend, that trend, you knew they were in trouble.
Yeah,
so
I knew they were in trouble. They were going from the same issue that I have experienced. I mean, the issue, I've experienced this after, but I knew how to fight it. But they were into a house, $700,000, and they're used to getting $900,000 for it, and they couldn't give it away at $700,000.
Right.
And so I went to my biggest customer and I said, listen, I'm going to close down. And they said, no, you're not. And I said, okay. I said, well, then this is what I'm going to do. And they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to continue to feed you with a little bit of work. And I said, okay, good. I went and talked to one of my friends who was also a partner, my neighbor. And he said, Mike, why are you stressing out about this? What just happens if you stop? Just stop what you're doing. You don't have to quit. You just have to stop what you're currently doing. Like, understand that. That's no different than walking across the sidewalk and saying, I need to take a 90-degree turn right now, because what is working is going into the car that's coming down the street. So I need to go to the left, or I need to step back for a second. So the next day I woke up, I went into my office and I let go 52 employees out of 55. I had 3 employees left. And I told those 3 employees, and I'd read this book called Traction. I told them, listen, if you're going to work for me, you're going to work based on our values. And our values are hard work, dedication, honesty, and integrity. And so here I am, while people are going bankrupt, while people are going out of business, I started a brand new business. Took a second out on my house at $140,000. I was $2 million in debt from inability to pay people. And within 6 months, or it was actually 8 months, I bought my first property, and I paid $165,000 for it. And I had a new investor that I had met in a coffee shop from a buddy or from a previous partner. And he said, I'll invest in you. And he gave us $500,000. And we took that $500,000, and over the next 5 years, from 2008 to 2013, we became the largest fix and flip contractor in the Portland market, just dominating. But everybody was going the opposite way. We did something different. And I had learned a lot from the previous people. But once again, it was a failure of the business. But here was the cool thing. I sat down one day and I wrote out a plan, and I told all the people that I owed money to that I will pay them. And it took me about 1.5 years to pay them all off. But not only did I pay them every month what I owed them, but I paid them timely on all their new stuff. So they continue to work for me. So it's like that debt reduction. So the smallest vendor got their money right away, but you wouldn't believe what was going on. In the middle of the economy crashing, I turned the news off, all this mess is going on. I got people coming into my office and hugging me because I'm the only one offering work. And even though I owed them a little bit of money, I was paying them on that money. So I was paying them stuff that nobody else was paying because everybody else was going bankrupt.
Right.
Once again, you treat people. So that was I considered it a failure, but it wasn't something that took me out. It was just, it's another time. The first lesson is just don't quit. Second lesson is just don't quit. Like, you can change directions, but just don't quit. And so for the next 5 years, I just killed it. And I know we're running out of time here, but listen, the last one is from 2013, 2019, I was running a great business. And we got into the market, and most people don't know about the inverted yield curve and all the kind of things that were going up through 2019, but there was a highly softening of the market. I own 50% of the market share in luxury homes. And so if you bought $1 million house, you were likely to buy 50% chance you were going to buy it from me in the Portland market.
Right.
And I own that market. And the market went from selling houses from $1.5 million to $1.2 million on the spot. It was not even cool.
Right.
And we went from, and it took me a long time, and I learned this lesson well, and I still utilize the lesson well. At that time in 2018, I designed a metric system that was different from what the RMLS publishes and things like that, that separated data so that I could see what was going on in the new construction market versus the as-built market. And so I designed these metrics to know if this ever happens to me again, I know what it is.
You were essentially designing your own canaries in the coal mine to give you a warning, an early warning system. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you can't track the data like that. The RMLS data, or the data that comes up from the MLS data, or the local selling, whatever entity it is, it's different in every state. They provide information, but they provide the full granular of the market, what's going on. They don't break markets down into new construction and as-builts. So you can see that it could say 2 months of inventory, but that doesn't mean it's too much of inventory in my asset class. I was in the $1 million to $1.5 million new construction market in that area. And if I just tracked it like that versus new construction or the whole market, which is new construction and as-built, the inventory was only two months of inventory. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if there's 16 months of inventory in the very asset class that you have 50%, you're in trouble.
Yeah, right. Yes, there's a glut. And
So
that's why you saw that
I
dip
went to
from
my customers.
1.5 to 1.2.
I went to my investors and my people that I dealt with, and they said, listen, you just need to walk away from this. And it was very hard to take. And you had everybody in between on it. But it shaped me who I was. And a week after that was done, I started writing the new business plan for Lux Living. And the new business plan changed the way that we interact with our investors, and changed the way that we interact with our assets, and changes the way of what we do. And it built the company that I have today, which is a highly diversified company in the real estate game: multifamily, single family, long-term rental, short-term rental, Section 8 rental, governmental housing, so that the Federal Reserve and everybody else can do what they want to do. The banks can do what they want to do with their federal funds rate. Everybody can do what they want to do.
Right.
But we're still going to be okay.
Because you have designed a real estate company with multiple rivers of cash.
Yes. And I'm fully integrated. So listen, Ray, when I buy a piece of asset, I make money. And I know that's foreign, but we walk with money. There is no, and if you've got an asset that's worth $1 million, for example, and you've got a loan on it, say of 900, but you can't get anybody to get the loan from you. Or you can't do a new loan, and you can't sell it because the market isn't going to give it. We will come in and give you the money for it, but also we will get money for doing so. So it's just it's no different than a fee that people charge when they buy assets.
Right. You know what? At your core, you're a problem solver.
At the core, we're here to solve other people's problems, whether you're an investor, whether you're a vendor. Listen, one of the hardest things, and one of the most passionate thing to my heart is the people that work on our properties. And I've watched this happen, and I've watched multiple operators make the same mistake, and I've watched multiple investors, and I've watched multiple lenders make the same mistake. Everybody wants their money before the man that does the work on the project. I want you to think about that. How is there any goodness to that? That it's okay that we pay the lender, but we don't pay the man that's working on the job site.
Sure.
And then we come up with all these fantasy stories about why they're not being paid, like, oh, the market turned on us, or all these things, whatever it is. And mine is people taking from other people. I get that, because there's bad actors out there, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about that when the monthly interest payment comes along, we need to be able to pay our interest payment. And we need to be able to pay our people that do the work. But the people that do the work on the site deserve their money first.
Right.
And I believe that to my core. And I would rather pay people. I want to put people before profits. But I know that that will resonate with a lot of investors out there. They do care about what they're investing in. And the only reason why they don't know about it is because nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about when the builders go bankrupt, the developers go bankrupt, that the people on the ground, the people that are doing the work, aren't being paid. And it's important to me. It's the most important part it is. In fact, if I'm dealing, there's nothing more like it, but that is a real problem. And there's a solvable issue. One is don't over leverage your property projects. Make sure you have plenty of cash on hand throughout the process. And don't take just because they will give. The lenders will a lot of time give you up to 75% of the ARV, right? Well, don't take the whole thing. Make sure that you have 10 to 15% of not only your own money, but investors' money in there, so that when it comes time where things take a little bit longer. Listen, you've been developing a long time. You know this to be true, right? You know that things take longer than what we think they do.
They always do. We always, what's the word they use? We always misunderestimate.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's a way to run a business.
Fundamentally, as entrepreneurs, we're optimists. We're going to be ridiculously optimistic. So our estimates are going to be off. So like you said, you're you know in your head that you're optimistic. So you're building in additional reserves.
I build in additional reserves, and I utilize the bank's thinking. The bank is right, and they've been right for 300 years, and it's rarely that they're not right. The only time the banks haven't been right is only 2 or 3 times in history. But the right number is never over leveraged. The 75% rule holds true. They will lend you up typically up to 75%. That means at any given time, the market will go down 25%. But the way in which you always win in the market is make sure you have cash on hand, so that you are never forced to sell an asset before it's ready.
Yep. There it is.
So we have a saying: we will do what's in the best interest of the asset. If it's in the best interest of the asset, then we will do it. Otherwise, we won't. And it's in the best interest in the asset to pay your vendors first.
Right.
It's in the best interest of the asset to have more cash than what is needed, so that you can pay your interest or set up interest reserves while you're going on. And if you don't do that, I am of the opinion you shouldn't be in this business. I just really am, because I've gone through the heartache. That heartache tells me it's not worth, that part is not worth it.
That heartache is what shaped your character.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, like, just imagine, like, if you've gone through failures, and listen, I know I'm not the only one. We all go through all kinds of failures. There's people that struggle with divorce. There's people that struggle with all kinds of issues in their personal life and business life. So I'm not the first one to go through it. But I am one of the first ones in this macho business that we deal with, that at least has some honesty to what's going on.
Yeah.
And that I can be reflective and say that was not beneficial to my fellow humans. Like, maybe I made a lot of money out of it, maybe I lost a lot of money, but it wasn't there was no benefit to the other person. And how can we design it? Like, we have to really become a steward of other people's money, of other people's emotions, of other people's work. We have to be a steward of them. Like, it's the golden rule of life. Like, love the neighbor as you love yourself, right? You have
Right.
to learn to take care of other people. And that does not have to be exclusive of capitalism or exclusive of capitalism. There is a way to take care of people and still make sure your bottom line is good, and still make sure that your investors get excellent returns, and still make sure that the lenders get paid timely.
Right. Right.
You have to systemize it and make it work for your benefit.
And as you mentioned before, your systems are largely driven by the book Traction by Gino Wickman. There we
It is
go.
one of the places where it started, right? It started, Good to Great. There's so many good books out there that I've read.
Good to Great by Jim Collins, you mentioned. Yeah, all of those.
Yeah, all of those. I've probably read over 1,000 books, and they're all. Listen, I got one grant by Ron Chernow. I probably butcher his last name. Great book. If you want an inspiring story about not giving up, this guy ended up being a U.S. president, two-time U.S. president, was known at that time. Booker T. Washington said he'd done more for the colored race than anybody up to that point. And he was way before his time in what he did. And he did these magnificent things, right? But a year before the war broke out, he had been discharged at Fort Vancouver for drunkenness.
Sure. I think Lincoln said about Grant, someone came to Lincoln and said, General Grant, he drinks a lot. I mean, he drinks a whole lot of whiskey. But he wins on the battlefield, right? But he drinks a whole lot of whiskey. And Lincoln said, yeah, we better do something about that. Find out what kind of whiskey he drinks and give it to the other generals.
That's awesome. But
and
he
Ron
did a lot for his
Chernow,
fellow
I don't know how to
human
pronounce
beings.
his name either, but I've read some of Ron Chernow's other books. He's an amazing author. He's a very thorough researcher and an amazing author. And I still don't know how to pronounce his name, but I haven't read the Grant biography by him. Would you recommend that?
I would. Yeah, like you said, I read it when I was going through a challenging time of my life, and I'm thinking this guy went through what is a complete humiliation, gets really kicked out of the military, and 2 years later he is general of the army, and then, and then 3.5 years later, or 4 years later, he is president of the United States.
Yeah. All from what did he do? He used to run a general store in.
His dad ran a general store.
Yeah, Northwest Illinois. What's the name of the town? Oh, it begins with a G. I'm going to remember it after we get off of here, but yeah. Oh, but boy.
My point was not that. My point was listen, he was in the face of adversity. He had all kinds of pain. And that biographies always, or things that are about people, they always inspire me to make me realize or to reaffirm that in life, you need to not stop.
Yeah.
We can't control all the events. We all make stupid mistakes. I know I've made a lot of them. But it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It just means that you need to go. And people along the way, you will have more detractors than you will have people that even like you, especially if you fail. If you fail at something, they will point out your failure along the way. They will remind you. They will remind you of the very thing that happened.
Yeah.
But you have to ignore the detractors, and you have to step forward and say, how can I turn this into good? I can name off 100 entrepreneurs that have done the same thing. I mean, most people don't know that Tesla was on its back and had no way to move forward, and some investor steps up and gives them a bunch of money. Most people don't know that, don't remember that Amazon here, Jeff Bezos is where he is, but they were close to running out of money. They didn't even make profit for the first 15 some years. I mean, come on, like, these are all things that are well known about entrepreneurs. Howard Schultz, the guy with coffee, Starbucks. People didn't like him. Colonel Sanders, he was a failure up until he works with his recipe, right? I mean, it's just you can see it time and time again where people don't. FedEx, the FedEx, check this out. FedEx, the employees, the pilots that were flying the planes were paying for the gas with their credit cards.
Oh, I
Right?
wasn't aware about that. I understand that Fred Smith went to Vegas to bet on a blackjack table to raise money for FedEx or something like that. I don't know if that's a true story or a rumor. You've read a lot about these. You know, I could ask you a bunch of questions. We are coming towards the end of our time together. We are at the point where we need to talk about what books you're reading and what you would recommend. First of all, I'm going to put it down as a recommendation. You recommended Traction by Gino Wickman and Grant by Ron Chernow.
Yeah.
What other books would you recommend? Like, what books are you using to sharpen this saw between your ears? And you're looking at your bookshelf.
I do. You know what? You know what? One of the biggest ones that I read in the last 4 or 5 years was Big Shifts Ahead. And if you haven't read it, you've lived it. I know you've lived it because you live in the Southwest, in the Southeast. And
Yeah.
if you live in this, you've watched the migration of people going towards these warmer climate areas.
Yes, yeah. I live in the Southwest now. I live in Arizona, so yes.
And 2008, it goes over, all the population growth and where they're going to move and what they're doing. And the book talks about it in depth. It changed my idea of what was going on. It made me realize where I wanted to be. I was in the Northwest. It talks about the Northwest being a great place. It's traditionally done very well. The Northeast has been a massive loser in the migration of people. Who knows, with all the hurricanes going on, what that does to the people coming back north. But my point is it talks about who's going to be our customers in the future. And if you understand who your customer is going to be, if you understand that you live in a certain climate and you're going to get a bunch of baby boomers or what is going to be on the tail end of that, then you should probably put in products that they're going to love, right? So that means that if you're going to cater to millennials, then that means that you need to produce products that the millennials like. Like one of our rental strategies right now is all based upon millennials. Millennials may not necessarily want to own a house. They want them with a lot of amenities. They want them to be cool. So we're developing townhouses that are net zero that cater to that person that doesn't even want to pick up I could ask my son, right? He's 20 years old. Hey, can you go and fix that dishwasher for me? Like, I know how to fix the dishwasher. He would rather just pay for it. Right? So
different mindset.
Fully different mindset. So if that's the case, then provide the millennials. Not only that, the millennials, a massive size of people, and it's bigger than the baby boomers. And as they start to do what they want to do, you're going to find that they're going to be spending their money and doing well. So if that's who you want to go after, then find the products that they love and that they hold dear to the heart. Some of ours are more around the sustainable play, so it makes sense from a sustainable play, right? And so it's all the little things, all the little metrics that this book talks about that I've just applied. I understand concepts really well, Ray. And so I'm able to take concepts and expand upon them and put those into strategy very quickly.
Right.
And so books provide a lot of that. The other latest thing I'm doing, which is kind of crazy, I've developed a report about what our Federal Reserve does and all that stuff. And then that report that I should have looked at in the 2018 that I ended up developing after the fact, I combined them into one report. And I'm working on that to figure out how can I get this to other real estate people, but make it very quickly, make the metrics in their market, like Phoenix, right? How do we get that same metric for Phoenix so that if you're a developer that's developing multifamily in the multifamily space, I want to be able to provide you with the data that the macroeconomics are saying, don't buy right now, wait. Even though right now I think it's the time to buy. I'm just going to put my hand up and say right now it's time to buy.
Yeah.
But A year ago was not a time to buy. So if
Mm-hmm.
you bought a year ago, my report would have told you don't buy a year ago.
Really?
And there's just
'Cause
factors.
looking at macro trends, is that something you're publishing now that our audience can get a hold of?
It's just coming out. I mean, I'm hoping to have it in the next 20 days.
Okay. 20 days. Tick, tick.
Exactly. But it breaks it down into industry. So if you're in the multifamily space, then it can break it down into multifamily. If you're in the residential space, it'll break it in. And then it breaks it down into price categories based upon, you know, $200,000 to 500,000 new homes. Do you want to go in that market?
Got it.
You know, that kind of thing.
All right, then that takes us to our next question. How can people get in touch with you so that they can, in 20 days, get that report from you and also be in touch with you?
You know, I think the best way is still my email, mikeh.luxlivinghomes@gmail.com. But also we're on Facebook under Lux Living. We are on Instagram under Lux Living. You can reach out to the direct message. Love LinkedIn. We've got a massive LinkedIn campaign going on with investors right now. So
Yes.
We're on there consistently. On LinkedIn, it's under Mike Hubbell. If you type in Mike Hubbell, you'll find me. And I think it's Mike Hubbell 3583, if I'm not mistaken. But you can find me on LinkedIn. That's another great way. We also have Lux Living has a page on LinkedIn as well. Our website, www.luxlivinghomes.net, is another great way to get a hold of us.
Wonderful.
For those who want to see us.
We will make sure we include those in the show notes. Mike Hubbell, there's so much I could ask you about. You're extremely well-read and you've been through some hard knocks, so that means you're educated. And I just want to keep asking you questions. I do want to make sure we have you back on the podcast. That's important.
I would love that, Ray. And I just, for the viewers that are listening, I just want to make sure it's never too late. Don't give up. Your next success is just right on the heels of your current failures. It always is. What you think is the end is just the beginning of the next climb. That's all it is. And you've got to get out of your mind that tomorrow is going to end. It's not going to end. Tomorrow is just a fresh new day to start onto your next path. And keep that focus on a daily basis. Don't get too far out in front of yourself. All of our pain and fear in our mind has to do with the future typically, or being ashamed of the past. And neither of them are the current present. So stay in the present and know where you want to go and be creative enough to know that things will change along the way. But if they change, that's an indication that you're closer to where you want to be. Because it's impossible to fail, Ray, if you look at it that way. It's impossible to fail if you get up every day and say, I'm just going to do one step today. If that's all you have, then that's all you need.
That is a perfect way to end our interview. Mike Hubbell, thank you for being a guest here on the ROI Clear podcast.
Take care, Ray. I appreciate you.
And thank you for engaging the ROI Clear podcast. At ROI Clear, we buy multifamily apartment properties, we improve them, and we give people a great place to live. At the same time, we give investors an opportunity to enjoy capital preservation, tax advantages, and a solid return on investment. If you'd like to know more, click the link to roiclear.com down below. We look forward to speaking with you.